My name is Claire Whitfield. I'm 34, and the calmest I have ever sounded in my life was the moment I handed my father the power of attorney folder and the keys to his Beacon Hill house with a small, almost polite smile. "Congrats," I said, because after 5 years of sleeping on hospital chairs, memorizing medication schedules, canceling my own future, and holding together a company that should have collapsed twice, I had finally learned that the quietest words can cut the deepest. My sister had been back for 8 weeks. 8 weeks. That was all it took for my father to sit at the head of a private shareholder dinner, clear his throat like a king rewriting history, and announce that she would inherit the company, the properties, the legacy, and the family name attached to all of it. My part, apparently, was $75,000, a thin smile from the family attorney, and a suggestion that I finally do something for myself. As if I'd spent 5 years on a spa retreat instead of learning how to read an EKG printout at 3 a.m. I remember the weight of the keys in my palm, the click of my nails against the leather folder, the way my sister's champagne-colored dress caught the chandelier light while she looked at me like I was supposed to be grateful for being dismissed so cleanly. I also remember the exact moment my father opened the letter I had left for him. His face changed before he even reached the second paragraph. The color rushed up his neck. His hand tightened around the paper. Then he looked straight at me across that room full of investors, relatives, reporters, and board members and shouted, "You can't be serious." The room went silent. I didn't. I just sat there, smiled once, and let the first domino fall. Before I tell you what was in that letter and why the rest of that night destroyed everything they thought they controlled, tell me what time it is where you are and where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels before you decide whether I was cruel or simply finished being invisible. 5 years earlier, I was not planning a revenge. I was planning a launch. I had a pitch deck open on my laptop, a train ticket to Providence in my tote bag, and a startup concept I had been building for 11 months. A growth consultancy for independent food brands that wanted to scale without losing quality. I had one investor call left before I could finally stop freelancing and make it real. Then my father collapsed. A ruptured artery led to emergency surgery. The surgery led to complications. The complications led to months of rehab, and the months became years of half recovery, stubbornness, and endless management. Quick lesson from that season of my life. A power of attorney isn't just a legal formality. It's the document that decides who gets to make your medical and financial calls when you can't. Learn what's in yours before you ever need it. He survived, but not cleanly. He could still make decisions, still bark orders, still insist he was fine, but he could not run his life the way he used to. And he definitely could not keep Whitfield Provisions stable without someone doing the invisible work under him. Whitfield Provisions was a mid-sized Boston food logistics and premium prepared meal company with contracts across hospitals, universities, boutique hotels, and private corporate cafeterias. For years, my father had treated it like a kingdom. Overnight, it became an ICU patient with invoices. My mother had already been gone 2 years by then. My sister Vanessa was in Miami building what she called a luxury lifestyle brand, which mostly meant expensive brunches, borrowed handbags, and captions about female leadership written under sponsored posts. So I stayed. Cancelled the pitch. I moved into my father's house temporarily. I learned how to read cardiology discharge notes, compare insurance claims, set up physical therapy transport, and reformulate menu lines. Because the man who had once mocked health food nonsense now needed low-sodium meals measured down to the teaspoon. I answered emails from suppliers at 4:20 in the morning. I renegotiated a packaging contract during a Fairview Medical Center follow-up. I built weekly cash flow sheets while waiting for his speech therapist to finish. I let my apartment lease auto-renew for 18 months without really living in it. I told myself it was not forever. I told myself family remembered who stood beside them when things fell apart. That lie lasted longer than it should have. Honestly, if lies gave frequent flyer miles, I'd have circled the globe twice. My father recovered enough to resume chairing meetings, but only because I handled the things no one applauds. The vendor disputes, the payroll timing, the client reassurance calls, the FDA labeling issue that could have turned into a lawsuit, the staffing gaps on Thanksgiving week, the health insurance appeals, the kitchen audit prep, the replacement of 2 operations managers in 1 quarter. Publicly, he was back. Privately, he still leaned on me for almost every practical decision that kept the company alive. Then Vanessa came home. 8 weeks before that shareholder dinner, she arrived in a black SUV with 6 matching suitcases, expensive sunglasses, and the kind of confidence people mistake for competence when they already want to believe the story. She hugged my father hard, cried at exactly the right volume, and within 24 hours she had rewritten the family narrative. Suddenly, her years away were international brand exposure. Her distance was strategic independence. Her total absence during rehab became respecting Dad's dignity while Claire handled the day-to-day. That was how 5 years of unpaid labor, emotional burnout, and postponed ambition got translated in our family. Day-to-day. At the first dinner after she returned, she swirled sparkling water in a wine glass and said, in front of my aunt, uncle, and 2 board advisors, "Claire is amazing at caretaking. Truly. But running the future of a company takes a different muscle." My father nodded. He actually nodded. I remember my hand tightening around my fork so hard my knuckles went white. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and decided it was easier not to. That was the night I understood something I should have accepted sooner. I had not been loved for my sacrifices. I had been used by them. And the moment they thought I was no longer necessary, they wanted me to disappear neatly, gratefully, quietly. Have you ever felt yourself being erased while still sitting at the table? That was the exact sensation. Not heartbreak, erasure. What they did not know was that disappearing had never really been my specialty. Surviving quietly was. Building quietly was. While my father slept through post-surgery pain and Vanessa posted throwback photos from South Beach captioned with things like, "Soft life, strong standards," I was living in 2 timelines at once. In one, I was the daughter who kept Whitfield provisions from bleeding out. In the other, I was still feeding the dream I had postponed the night of that cancelled investor call. It started small because it had to. A packaging redesign for a local organic soup company. A digital retention strategy for a frozen meal startup in Brookline. Menu positioning for a women-owned cafe group trying to break into hospital vending contracts. I worked after midnight with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and one eye on the baby monitor-style camera we'd placed in my father's room after his second fall. I built case studies under an LLC named Bright Harbor Growth. I did not use family money. I did not steal company clients. I did not break any law. Small business lesson free of charge. If you're moonlighting into your own venture while employed, or in my case unofficially employed by your own family, keep meticulous, dated records of what you built on your own time with your own tools and without company resources. It's the difference between a side hustle and a lawsuit. I simply used the skills I had sharpened while keeping my father's company alive. Market timing, vendor psychology, logistics, storytelling, margin strategy, to win consumer trust and turn them into something that belonged to me. The first year, I made enough to cover software and taxes. The second year, enough to start saying no to low-value work. The third year, enough to hire a contract designer and a data analyst twice a month. The fourth year, enough to quietly realize I was no longer building a side hustle. I was building an exit. The biggest break came 6 months before Vanessa flew back to Boston. A regional healthcare food services network based in Denver, Meadowbrook Campus Hospitality, put out a call for a multi-state rebrand and operations growth partner. Whitfield Provisions had tried to get in through a legacy relationship and failed. I knew because I had assembled the original briefing packet for my father. Their pitch was stale, expensive, and tone-deaf. It talked about prestige while the client wanted trust, compliance, human-centered messaging, and a better patient-family experience. I submitted through Bright Harbor Growth with no family name attached. My proposal combined brand strategy, digital ordering simplification, retention data, and a human story framework shaped by the exact reality I had been living. Food is not just product when families are scared, grieving, healing, or exhausted. Food becomes the one practical kindness they remember. That proposal got me to the final round. The final round got me a confidential call. The call became a draft agreement worth just over $3.4 million, Huge for me, but still plausible for a serious multi-state transformation project. I had not signed it yet because I was still trying to believe I could do one more year for my father and then leave cleanly. Then Vanessa came back, and the family decided I was worth $75,000 and a sentimental pat on the head. The day after my father announced privately that he intended to transfer majority control and most of the estate to her, he had the family lawyer send me a packet. Inheritance waiver, transfer acknowledgement, house access turnover, POA surrender. Quiet exit language dressed up as concern. Buried inside was a 5-year non-compete tied to Whitfield provisions and any direct competitive work in hospitality food strategy. It would have caged me if I had signed it as an executive or employee. But I hadn't been either. Not formally. 4 years my father had delayed giving me the title I actually earned, because titles meant leverage, salary, and documented value. He wanted obedience without structure. It finally became his mistake. I took the papers to Nina Bennett, the attorney I had hired 2 years earlier when I first realized I needed legal protection from my own family. Nina had the kind of mind that turned rage into precision. She read everything, tapped the table once and said, "He's trying to push you out quickly because he assumes you have nowhere to go." Then she looked up. "You do have somewhere to go, don't you?" I showed her the Meadowbrook draft. She read it, smiled once, then leaned back and said the sentence that changed the temperature of my whole body. "Claire, the non-compete does not cover independent work done before disinheritance when you were never formally classified as an officer. In plain English, your father tried to erase your authority so completely that he also erased his power to contain you." Educational moment on the house. This is exactly why non-compete clauses are only enforceable within the scope of what was actually agreed to, in writing, by someone with a legal standing to agree to it. If you were never given a title or contract, you may have far more freedom than a scary-looking document implies. Always have a lawyer read the fine print before you sign anything labeled. Just a formality. For a moment I could not speak. 5 years of exhaustion, grief, resentment, loyalty, guilt, and low-level humiliation all met that one legal fact and turned into clarity. Nina and I spent the next 2 days building a timeline. She reviewed every email trail, every invoice, every contract, every calendar record showing what I had done for Whitfield provisions, and what I had billed separately after hours. We also made a decision about the shareholder dinner. Whitfield Provisions hosted one major private event each spring for board members, investors, top partners, and select media. This year's dinner at the Ashford was supposed to introduce Vanessa as the next face of the company and reassure the market that family succession was strong. My father invited the Boston Business Chronicle, one Boston Herald columnist, and 2 local trade reporters, because he wanted the transition to look graceful, modern, and inevitable. Nina looked at that guest list and said very calmly, "Good. If they want theater, we'll give them documentation." I did not want screaming. I did not want a meltdown. I wanted something much harder for them to survive. A public correction. That night, back in the room where I had once kept color-coded medication charts taped inside a closet, I wrote the letter my father would later read with his face turning red. I did not make it cruel. I made it accurate. I told him exactly what 5 years had cost me. I told him that every time he praised Vanessa's vision, he was praising confidence built on work she had not done. I told him that while he was preparing to reward appearance, I was preparing to step fully into value. And I told him that by the time he finished reading, he would understand what it meant to Ms. Price a daughter. The last 48 hours before the dinner were not glamorous. They were surgical. Vanessa floated through the house like the ending had already been filmed in her favor. She had a stylist come in for fittings. She practiced her acceptance speech in the breakfast room with a ring light balanced on cookbooks. Genuinely, if confidence were currency, she'd have bought the whole company outright. She told one of our long-time operations managers that legacy companies need fresh, aesthetically literate leadership now, which was a sentence so empty I almost admired it. Then she crossed a line she never should have touched. I overheard her telling my father that once the transfer was complete, they needed to let go of deadweight loyalists. Her phrase, for older staff who were emotionally attached to Claire's way of doing things. Those so-called loyalists were people who had helped me hold the company together while my father was relearning how to walk upstairs. Emily in vendor compliance, James in route operations, Karen in hospital accounts. People who missed their kids' weekends because my family crisis had become their professional burden, too. That was when any softness I still had toward my father died for good. The night before the dinner, I opened a plastic storage bin in the back of my closet and found an old tablet filled with videos I had taken during the worst year of his recovery. Not for social media, not for sentiment, for medical tracking. One clip showed him trying and failing to lift a spoon without his hand shaking. Another showed me coaching him through speech drills at 2:13 a.m. because he refused to practice with a therapist but would do it with me. I watched 30 seconds and had to stop. I was not crying over the man he had become in public. I was grieving the version of family I kept insisting still existed in private. Then I found something else in the same bin, a sealed note in my mother's handwriting. She had written it before she died and tucked it into one of my old business school notebooks. It was only 4 lines long. Claire, you were never born to carry other people forever. Learn the difference between love and disappearance. When your moment comes, do not shrink to make anyone else comfortable. I sat on the floor with that note in my hands for a long time. Then I folded it, put it in my blazer pocket, and went back to work. Nina had coordinated with the event tech team through a legitimate media add-on under Bright Harbor Growth's pending announcement. Meadowbrook had agreed to release a statement the same evening if my father forced the succession reveal in public, which he absolutely would, because men like him cannot resist a stage once they think they own the ending. We did not hack anything. We did not sabotage anything illegal. We arranged for a scheduled media segment to be uploaded into the event queue immediately after Vanessa's introduction slot, and we made sure the ballroom technician had written confirmation that a final-minute partner asset might need to roll. Nathaniel Hale, the CEO of Meadowbrook, agreed to attend quietly at the back of the room with his VP of strategy. He was a sharp, controlled man with no patience for family theatrics and every appetite for clean execution. "I hate nepotism," he told me on the phone that afternoon. "But I love a precise reveal. Send me the cue time." Around 9 o'clock that evening, my father called me into his study. He was already in a tuxedo shirt, sleeves buttoned, watch polished, voice firm. "I expect you to behave tomorrow," he said. "Vanessa is trying to step into a difficult role. She doesn't need bitterness in the room." I looked at him and asked, "Did you ever think I deserved the role you're handing her?" He did not answer immediately, which told me everything. Then he said, "You were invaluable when I was ill, but that was support. Vanessa has presence." Presence. I almost laughed. 5 years of labor reduced to support, while 8 weeks of curated confidence became leadership. I handed him the folder then and there, the POA documents he wanted back, the spare house keys, the office keys, the access cards, all of it. "You'll have the rest tomorrow," I said. He seemed relieved. That was the cruel beauty of it. He thought compliance had finally arrived. He had no idea it was just the calm before correction. The ballroom at the Ashford looked exactly the way my father liked power to look. Gold light, polished glass, expensive smiles, and enough important people in one room to make him feel immortal. By the time dessert was cleared, Vanessa was glowing in pale silk, already accepting congratulations before anything had been made official. My father stepped up to the podium and began the speech he had probably rehearsed for days, talking about legacy, resilience, and the future of Whitfield Provisions as if the last 5 years had simply arranged themselves around him. Then he said Vanessa's name, and the room began to applaud. That was when the courier arrived with the envelope. He signed for it with visible irritation, opened it casually, and then everything changed. His eyes moved across the page once, then again. The color rushed up his neck. He looked straight at me across the room and shouted, "You can't be serious." The applause died instantly. Vanessa froze at the podium, still smiling for half a second too long before panic finally reached her face. I stood slowly and said, "You should keep reading." Right on cue, the presentation screen behind Vanessa changed. Her title slide vanished, replaced by the Bright Harbor Growth logo. A low wave of confusion moved through the room. Then Nathaniel Hale, CEO of Meadowbrook Campus Hospitality, stood from the back and calmly introduced himself. My father recognized him immediately. Vanessa clearly did not. Nathaniel explained that Meadowbrook had awarded a major multi-year strategic transformation contract not to Whitfield Provisions, but to Bright Harbor Growth, the firm I had built quietly while spending 5 years holding together both my father's recovery and much of the company's invisible operational reality. The screen shifted again, this time showing my name beneath Founder and Principal Strategist, followed by project metrics, client wins, and proof of the work I had done independently. Vanessa tried to recover by calling it a misunderstanding, but the room had already changed sides. Reporters were typing. Investors were whispering. Board members were staring at my father instead of applauding his chosen successor. I walked to the stage, took the microphone, and introduced myself properly. I explained that while my family had reduced my 5 years of sacrifice to a caretaking role and a $75,000 dismissal, I had been building something real after midnight, on weekends, and between hospital calls. Then I announced the Meadowbrook contract value and confirmed that everything had been built legally, independently, and without family assets. That was the moment the illusion broke for good. My father accused me of turning against the family, and I answered with the only truth that mattered. No. I just stopped letting this family turn me into unpaid background labor. Even the people who had spent the whole evening praising Vanessa could not defend what they were seeing. A reporter asked her a basic question about the business direction she was supposedly ready to lead, and she could not answer it. One board member asked my father whether he had really planned to hand over the company to someone with 8 weeks of staged involvement while pushing out the daughter who had actually carried the weight for 5 years. He said nothing because there was nothing left to say. I placed the signed inheritance waiver, the returned POA, and the house and office keys on the podium in front of him. You wanted everything back, I said quietly. Congratulations. Then I stepped away from the microphone, shook Nathaniel Hale's hand, and left the stage while the room exploded behind me. Not with drama but with consequences. By the time I reached the ballroom doors, Vanessa was no longer the future of Whitfield Provisions. She was just the woman standing under the lights when the truth finally arrived. The fallout began before I reached the valet stand. By the time I got into my car, Nina had already forwarded me 3 messages from reporters, 2 from potential clients, and 1 from a private equity observer who simply wrote, "You changed the room." Overnight, the story moved through Boston business circles faster than any official statement could contain. The Boston Business Chronicle ran the headline first: "Invisible Daughter Outmaneuvers Family Succession at Whitfield Provisions Event." The Herald piece was less dramatic but somehow harsher, because it focused on the governance failure. Investors care less about family drama than about leadership incompetence, and my father had accidentally staged both at once. The next morning, the Whitfield Provisions board called an emergency meeting without Vanessa present for the opening session. By noon, my father had been stripped of unilateral succession authority pending review. By afternoon, Vanessa's ceremonial transition announcement had been paused indefinitely, a phrase that made me laugh harder than it should have, though the consequences got heavier quickly. 2 hospital partners requested immediate clarification on leadership stability. A hotel group delayed a renewal. Our longtime packaging vendor called James directly to ask whether he should still trust existing numbers. 3 employees I had trained called me that weekend, asking whether Bright Harbor Growth was hiring. One of them cried on the phone before she even reached the second sentence, because she thought staying loyal to me had made her disposable at Whitfield. I hired 2 within 10 days. Vanessa tried to fight back where people like Vanessa always do first. Image. She posted a filtered black and white Instagram story about betrayal from those who resent feminine leadership. And within an hour, people were screen recording clips from the dinner and mocking her in the comments, because the woman preaching leadership had not been able to answer a single operational question under pressure. A hospitality analyst on LinkedIn called her a case study in aesthetic confidence without executive depth. It went mildly viral in our industry. 2 brand collaborations quietly vanished from her profile within a week. One of her friends leaked that she had begun selling designer bags through a reseller to cover her personal debt, because my father had frozen her discretionary access while fighting with the board. I did not enjoy that, but I also did not rescue her from it. My father called 3 times in 5 days. I ignored the first 2. On the third, I answered because I was done being haunted by the ringtone. He skipped apology and went straight to negotiation, which was very him. "We need to discuss stabilizing market confidence," he said. Not, "I hurt you." Not, "I was wrong." Market confidence. "You mean you need to discuss it," I said. "I'm fine." He exhaled sharply. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Act like this isn't still your family." I let the silence sit. Then I said, "Family was the word you used when you needed sacrifice. Business was the word you used when you denied value. You don't get to switch definitions because the room turned on you." He asked for a meeting. I gave him one a week later at my office on my schedule, with Nina present and the conversation documented. By then, Bright Harbor Growth had subleased a glass-front suite in the Seaport district. Not huge but real. My own lease. My own team. My own name on the door. My father arrived 10 minutes early and looked around the space like he was trying to understand how it had existed without his permission. He did not bring Vanessa. Smartest decision he made all month. The conversation lasted 90 minutes. He came in offering partnership language and left having learned what boundaries sound like when a daughter no longer needs permission to set them. I told him clearly that I would not rejoin Whitfield Provisions, would not become its hidden fixer again, and would not publicly soften what had happened to make him comfortable. If Whitfield wanted to work with Bright Harbor on specific projects, it would be under contract at market rate, with independent authority, documented deliverables, and no control given to Vanessa. He called the terms insulting. Nina called them generous. The board, when they saw the draft, called them necessary. The most painful consequence for him was not financial. It was structural. For the first time in his life, he had to accept terms from me because he no longer had the leverage to dictate them. Vanessa fared worse in the short term. The board required her to step back completely from any executive role and enroll in an accredited business program before she could even be considered for operations exposure. My Aunt Margaret stopped mentioning natural leadership at family lunches. My uncle, who had praised Vanessa for being polished enough to handle big money, suddenly became a loud believer in meritocracy. Funny how values evolve when embarrassment gets expensive. There was one more aftershock I did not expect. While sorting through old files to document transition history for Nina, I found a storage unit receipt in my mother's name. She had rented it before she died. Inside were boxes of my old notebooks, pitch drafts, school sketches, strategy papers, and a letter addressed to me that I had somehow missed the night before the dinner. In it, she wrote that she worried I was becoming too good at surviving without witness. She wrote that some daughters become so competent inside crisis that everyone starts treating their strength as a service instead of a self. She ended with a line I still keep in my desk. "When people confuse your endurance for your purpose, leave." That letter did not make me softer toward my father. It made me steadier. It reminded me that building a new life was not betrayal. Sometimes it was the first honest thing you did. 9 months later, Bright Harbor Growth occupied the full floor. We had 12 clients, a team of 14, and a reputation for turning messy hospitality and healthcare-adjacent brands into trusted systems that actually worked for real people instead of investor decks. Meadowbrook expanded our contract. A university dining group signed with us. A women-led meal kit company from Portland told me they chose us because, "Your work sounds like someone who has actually had to hold a life together, not just present one." That line stayed with me. Success felt less cinematic than people imagine. It was quieter, better sleep, cleaner numbers, a calendar that belonged to me. The ability to buy groceries without hearing my father's voice in my head measuring my choices. The ability to leave the office at 7 o'clock on a Thursday and know no one could call me back into becoming invisible. Whitfield Provisions survived, but altered. My father lost part of his control to a stronger board oversight structure. Vanessa completed the first semester of a serious executive program and, to my surprise, actually stayed in it. That did not absolve her. It simply made her more real. We crossed paths for the first time alone at Thanksgiving at my aunt's house. She looked different without the performance layer. Quieter, less polished, more exhausted, but also less hollow. "I was awful to you," she said, standing by the sink while everyone else argued over pie. "Not just at the dinner. Before. 4 years." I looked at her and said, "Yes." She nodded like she deserved that answer, which she did. Then she asked if I thought people could learn after being handed what they didn't earn. "Some can," I said, "if humiliation doesn't become their whole personality." It was not forgiveness. It was the first honest conversation we had ever had. My father took longer. He requested a formal meeting 1 month later. This time not about contracts, just coffee. Almost said no. Then I remembered boundaries are stronger when they are chosen, not avoided. So I said yes. In a hotel lobby, in daylight, for 40 minutes. He looked older than I remembered, but less armored. He did not start with market language. He started with, "I was wrong," for simple words. Then more, slowly, awkwardly, as if apology were a language he had been forced to learn late. He admitted he had mistaken loyalty for availability, competence for duty, and Vanessa's polish for readiness. He admitted that when I was the one beside him in rehab, he had somehow convinced himself that because I stayed, I would always stay. "I thought you could take it," he said. "That was the problem," I answered. "You treated my capacity like consent." He closed his eyes for a second after that. I do not think men like my father enjoy being understood that precisely. He asked whether I could ever trust him again. I told him trust was not a speech, not a family dinner, not one emotional meeting. Trust was pattern, distance, respect, follow-through. And even then, not everything broken becomes what it was before. He nodded. He did not argue. That mattered. In spring, Whitfield Provisions and Bright Harbor collaborated on one limited project for a mid-sized hospital system, under the exact project-based terms I had set. No family language, no hidden labor, no assumptions. Just work, scope, invoices, and accountability. It went well. Not because we healed magically, but because I refused to enter any room where my value depended on love being interpreted correctly. The final moment of that year came at a small internal event in my own office, when one of my younger strategists asked me why I had kept the old house keys in a glass box on a bookshelf. Told her, because they reminded me that returning something is not always a loss. Sometimes it is proof that you finally understand it was never really yours to carry. If you're asking whether I forgave my father completely, the truthful answer is no. Not in the sentimental way people like to package endings. What I built instead was better than total forgiveness. I built distance with dignity. I built work with boundaries. I built a life where no one gets to call my sacrifice love while pricing it like convenience. And if you were sitting where I sat that night, letter on the table, keys in your hand, father red-faced in front of a ballroom that finally saw the truth, would you have done what I did? Would you have walked away with the calm smile? Or would you have stayed long enough to make them feel every second of being seen too late? Thank you for staying with us through this emotional story. All characters, events, and conflicts are fictional and created only for dramatic entertainment and reflection. We hope this story reminds you that sometimes revenge is not about hurting others back, but about finally understanding your worth, refusing to be manipulated, and choosing a life where respect is no longer negotiable.